Okay, so we are live. I would like to say welcome everyone to our monthly community meeting. We appreciate everyone who's joining us this evening. Alum ko cái gì giang để trôi ria cái bên làm này jing ngày 12 tháng 3 rồi cái bên. First, I would like to ask everyone to type in their names, organization, and email address in the chat box, and please also use the chat box if you have question, or there's like a raise hand button that you can also press. Before we start our session tonight, I would like to introduce Melina Kasor. She will be our facilitator for this evening. Melina Kasor is a student at UNCG in the public health department, and she is the vice president of the Monsignor American organization on campus. And also Benong translator. She has a lot of things going on with her. So without further ado, please welcome Melina, and I will let her have the floor.
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I would love to thank everyone who has tuned in on this Friday afternoon. We all know everyone has a busy week, and just being able to take this time to educate ourselves on the COVID-19 situation is something I admire everyone here to be doing. First, I would just like to thank Dr. Wright and Dr. Issam for joining us today. Just give a little brief history of them. Dr. Issam is the pharmacy operation coordinator at the Cone Community Health and Wellness Center. She has been serving there since 2014. She's also an alumni from North Carolina State University as well as Campbell University. So I'm very honored to be here. And let's see, one of her favorite quotes is actually by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I just think that having a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King just shows what kind of characters we have here today. Also joining us is Dr. Wright. He is a pulmonary and critical care medicine physician with Cone Health Medical Group. He's previously included pulmonary and intensive care medicine and has recently changed to a focus on the medically underserved and uninsured population at the community care clinics. He is alumni from Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, and we are also here to recognize that he has been a past board chair of Hospice and Palliative Care Center of Greensboro. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and hand the floor over to them as they go ahead and begin this presentation.
Thank you for that introduction, Melina, and perhaps we can see the first slide. I'm really excited to be with this group, and I appreciate the privilege of joining my colleague, Courtney Issam, to educate us all more about the COVID vaccines that are now currently available. Let's go to the next slide. Today's topics, we just go to the next slide. One slide back. Today's topics, I will talk a little bit about Cone Health's vaccine goals and our strategy as it currently exists, and then introduce some key facts about the vaccine and its effectiveness and safety will be covered by my colleague, Dr. Issam. And then I will pick up with Mythbusters and go through some more of the common misconceptions about the vaccines. And we're going to be referring to all three vaccines that are currently available, including the most recent one released, Johnson & Johnson. And then Courtney will finish up in trying to engage the group on ways we can help. And we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. I want to start by citing a very sobering fact. A study done by the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2020 showed that in our Asian population in our country, the hospitalization and death rates per 10,000 were double that of our white population. And this is the importance of really engaging with your group and partnering together. Next slide. We want to be able to share our vaccine goals. If you can go to the next slide, vaccine goals. Next slide back from that. No, other way. Thank you. We want to share with you our vaccine goals and what we learned early in the pandemic, and I certainly learned this when I was calling my first COVID positives to the Montagnard outbreak that occurred in May, end of May and into June, is that we need to create messages that are easy to understand and work with messengers such as your group to help folks believe and relate to the information we're trying to share. I like in my practice with my patients to try to draw sometimes analogies with the patients rather than trying to use complex medical terms, and try to make a connection with that patient and really try to improve our communication. And we find that improved communication will impact and reduce vaccine hesitancy. So therefore, our goal is to try to build trust, educate, inform, and encourage the Black and Brown community, of which the Asian American community falls into, to take the COVID-19 vaccine. And we're actually partnering with our county DHHS, with our administration of vaccines at larger venues such as the Greensboro Coliseum, but we also are partnering with groups like yourself. And did you go to a full screen view? Yeah, that might work better. Let's go back a slide. Just back a slide one. We want to partner with our communities to establish mobile clinics that can occur with smaller sub-sites within our minority communities to provide easier access. And I understand Jamila Pinder, who's on this meeting, has partnered with your group for one such vaccine event in the Asian community. We want to identify what the concerns are in the community, and we want to be able to address them. We want to try to, and we are also very much committed in allocating at least 35% of our vaccines to the Black and Brown community members, and partnering with you to increase that vaccine appointments by breaking down barriers. Not everybody has access to IT, finding ways to directly access vaccine appointments through direct outreach. Next slide. As you look at the communities we serve, you can see in this chart, as of March 2nd, almost 1.7 million doses were given across the state, first doses, and yet 36% of our residents in our state and 40+% in the Piedmont Triad are members of our community of color, and 40% of our positive cases across the state were in the communities of color. But if you look at our currents, the pie chart on the left, we're well below that 40%. And in the Asian population, only 2.5% have been vaccinated thus far. So we certainly have a lot of work to do. Our counterparts are registering, but we need to come together as a group and figure out how we can break through and get more of our communities of color vaccinated. Next slide. I want to talk about vaccine effectiveness and safety. And as I talk about this, I want everybody on the call to have that in a mental image of what the virus looks like. It's been on many media outlets, and you've seen many images of this sphere or ball, this rounded structure, and growing out all around it, which is why they call it corona virus, much like the sun has a corona. With the rays of the sun coming out, it has spikes coming out all around it. Those spikes look like, frankly, to me, like a stalk of broccoli or cauliflower, a vegetable stalk. And at the end, that vegetable stalk is the spike protein. That allows that virus to actually attach to our cells and get in and cause virus reproduction and growing, so more virus get into your body and are released. But also those protein spikes break off and get into your immune system, and that's what makes you ill and gives you all the symptoms of the virus. The two vaccines that we have now, the Moderna and the Pfizer, contain small segments of protein called messenger RNA. And that actually stimulates our immune cells to produce antibodies that go against these spike proteins to reduce the amount of virus in our bodies. if we obtain the virus and to reduce the illness that we get. And they've been showing strong results in terms of reducing severity of illness. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine actually comes from an adenovirus, which is a type of respiratory virus, but it does not cause illness. But they use that as an agent to take virus genetic information into the immune cells, and from that, the antibodies are produced. So it's a slightly different mechanism, but very effective. Next slide. As you can see, there's been intentional efforts in the Pfizer research trial and the Moderna research trials to include our community of color. And you can see the Asian American population in the trials, a little over 4% in both of those trials. And I can tell you the Johnson & Johnson actually recruited 6% Asians in those trials. And next slide. And as you look at this table compared to the US population of 16-plus-year-old individuals, while not at the 5.9% for Asian, the 4.4 for Pfizer, 4.7 for Moderna, and 6% for Johnson & Johnson are well above what we usually see with research trials from previous types of research studies. Now I'd like for my colleague, Dr. Courtney Issam, to take us forward into, next slide, concepts about why you should get the vaccine and more detail about the individual vaccines themselves. Courtney?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wright. So next up, we have why you should get the vaccine. So we know that there's been millions of deaths and cases due to COVID-19. In the US alone, there's been over 520,000 deaths. So when we're looking at the Asian population, we can tell that there's an equal amount of deaths due to COVID-19 as compared to white non-Hispanic persons. When we look at hospitalizations, we see 1.1 times more likely to be hospitalized. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown, like a chart just showing the risk of COVID infection and hospitalization in our race and ethnicity. So again, it's just kind of showing what I just reiterated just here a second ago. So 1.1 times more likely hospitalizations in the Asian population, and then equal amount of deaths in the Asian population compared to white non-Hispanic persons. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Wright just said, we do have 3 vaccines right now that have been issued as emergency use for the COVID-19 virus. We have Pfizer and Moderna, which, as he mentioned, are our messenger RNA vaccines. And then we have Johnson & Johnson, which is our one-shot series, and that's our adenovirus vaccine that has a DNA for spike protein. So for the Pfizer and Moderna, those are our 2-shot series doses. The Pfizer is 21 days apart, so 2 doses again. Moderna is 2 shots, 28 days apart. And as I mentioned earlier, we have Johnson & Johnson that's just 1 shot. As far as the side effects, most of the vaccines have all the same side effect profile. We have headaches, pain at the site of injection, tiredness, and chills. We have noticed that there are milder side effects for the mRNA vaccines. So let's go to the next slide. So I like graphics, and this just kind of shows, the side effect profiles and the percent that we're seeing that. So for local pain, it's about 27%, fatigue 21%, and headaches about 18%. I will say that usually we'll see these side effects more likely in your 24 to 48 hours of getting the vaccine. And then also you're going to see it more likely after you've gotten your second dose of you're either getting the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine. Next slide, please. All right, so one thing I did forget to mention with the side effects. So, sometimes we like to go ahead and prep ourselves by taking Tylenol, ibuprofen before getting vaccines. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you can take it afterwards, but We just don't want you to take Tylenol or ibuprofen beforehand because this could interfere with the immune response for the virus or for the vaccine. All right, so let's talk about the effectiveness. So how well are these vaccines working? So with Pfizer, it's come out that it's 95% effective. And then with Moderna, 94.1% effective. And then with Johnson & Johnson, we've seen 72% overall effectiveness, and then 86% against severe disease in the US. And we have seen that more than likely there are protection against the coronavirus for all of these vaccines. And those for the variants from the UK and South Africa. So most of these vaccines do offer some type of protection against those variants that we've seen come into play. Next slide, please. So again, I just like graphics, so it just kind of shows you the percent of effectiveness. So again, with Pfizer, we're seeing 95%, Moderna 94.1%, and then with Johnson & Johnson, 72%. So we know that when we're vaccinating, we're able to, stop the spread of the disease and help save lives. I do want to mention though, so when you look at Johnson & Johnson, it does seem like it may be an inferior vaccine, but that's not the case at all. So again, when it was studied at a different time when these other two vaccines came on the market. So this vaccine was actually studied when the variants were in play. So we want to remember that and just, remember that it is not an inferior vaccine. It's it does very well at protecting against severe disease and hospitalization. And then a way I kind of like to think about it is, okay, I have 72% effectiveness from this one shot. And then if I don't get the shot at all, then I don't have any type of protection. So I just kind of like to, keep that in the back of my mind when people are looking at this and they think that it's not as effective. Next slide, please. So is the vaccine safe? So yes, we have seen through the studies that have been done with the vaccines that there's no safety concerns to be identified. We've also been able to vaccinate thousands of our physicians and healthcare workers here at Cone Health, and then we've also been able to vaccinate those in the community. And we've not seen any significant safety concerns during this time period. All right, so now we'll move back to Dr. Wright and we'll talk about Mythbusters.
So yes, thank you, Courtney. And I want to double click on the Johnson & Johnson. There's significant data. You do not get severe illness and you do not get hospitalized. You might have mild, but you'll have also, more importantly, very decreased viral load. So you will not be as contagious should you get the virus, which we have to remember with these vaccines. That's part of the benefit, not only for the individual, but for the public good, because you will not be spreading the virus to your family members and other members in your community. But how about some of the other myth busters? And I'd like to correct some of these that are prevalent and might be preventing some members of our Asian American communities from really rolling up their sleeves when it's their time. Next slide. The first myth I'd like to talk about is COVID vaccines cannot be effective or safe because they were just pushed out too quickly. Well, it turns out, next slide, that every phase of the vaccine was completed more efficiently through a very vigorous and coordinated public and private healthcare effort. Not seen with any prior vaccination. We were in a crisis mode, in a wartime footing, and so all of these companies work together, and many times in regular research trials, you'll have a phase 1, a phase 2, and it'll take a long time to go through those processes. But these were all done, in a sense, concurrently. Next, click again on the slide. And you'll see, compared to older vaccine trials from many years ago, this compression time that you're seeing with the coronavirus vaccine. But remember that it produces a very safe vaccine itself, because the methodology for developing this messenger RNA, a small snippet of protein that goes into your immune cells and allows them to produce the antibody, that whole process has been in development for literally decades. Scientists have been warning and thinking about a potential pandemic from a viral illness for many, many years, and they were prepared when this hit, they already had the technology, it just not yet had been applied. Next slide. If you look at, and click again, there are no elements, the next myth, the mRNA vaccine or the mRNA, the messenger RNA method of the Pfizer, Moderna will alter my DNA. It does not alter your DNA. There are no elements in the vaccine. Go ahead and click 2 more times. It does not affect your DNA. It contains no infectious elements. There's no live virus. You cannot now give the COVID to someone else once you've been vaccinated. And I would also comment that the Johnson & Johnson is the same way. It does get into the nucleus, unlike the other 2 vaccines, of the immune cells, but it will not in any way alter your DNA of any kind. You also, once you receive the vaccine, you will not have a positive COVID test. You will not all of a sudden, if you were to get tested for COVID, turn positive. It will not show up in that manner. It will not affect that in that manner. Scientists designed this vaccine for one purpose and one purpose only, to keep us from getting the virus. And that's the most important thing that we think. Your viral load is significantly reduced. Your illness is significantly tamped down to just mild or no illness. And your risk of being in the hospital, on a ventilator, in the ICU is significantly impacted. Next slide. Myth 3, I've already recovered from COVID, so you know what? I'm not going to get vaccinated. Wrong. Most patients will have a waning immunity within 1 or 2 or 3 months after they have had a COVID illness. The data has shown that. We've had plenty of data collected over the past year of the pandemic to show that evidence. Due to the severe health risk associated with COVID-19, reinfection is possible. And as that immunity goes down, you in fact could get sick again. And I actually know of a case in my clinic, a patient who got the virus a second time. So next click. If you've had COVID-19, however, let's say you had the infection, when should you get the vaccine? In the early days of the vaccine availability, they were saying wait about 60, 45 days, 90 days. Now the data shows you actually can get the vaccine after you've been cleared to be out of isolation, provided your acute illness has resolved. Now, if you've been in the hospital and you've been very, very ill, you probably need to wait more than 2 weeks. You might want to wait more like 30 to 45 days, but that's up to you partnering with your doctor to determine when it's safe to receive the vaccine. Next slide. We at Cone Health developed a monoclonal antibody infusion, and that is, we actually infuse antibodies that are like the antibodies your body is producing, and they bind up the virus and reduce illness. But it's designed for patients who are already sick but not already in the hospital. We've actually treated over 1,000 patients so far in our system, with significant improvements in those patients and marked decrease in their hospitalization risk. However, if you received one of those treatments, and some in the community may have, you would want to wait 90 days after the treatment before you receive the vaccine. Next slide. No people of color were involved in the vaccine trials. Continue clicking. As you can see, 4.4 of the 40% of the 40,000 in Pfizer were Asian, 4.7 were Asian. We've already shown this in the Moderna trial, and 6% in the Johnson & Johnson trial. If you keep clicking there, you'll see typical vaccine trial participation rate in other types of vaccine trials has been much lower, and Black and Latino vaccine trial rates have often been as low as 3%. So you can see that the participation rate in our Black population and other communities of color were much higher. And in fact, in the Pfizer trial, nearly 1 in 5, 20% of the volunteers in the Pfizer trial were either Black or Latino. Next slide. The next myth, vaccine trials did not include volunteers who were pre-existing conditions among people of color. The truth is, all 3 vaccines had volunteers who had comorbidities such as high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, immunosuppressed, chronic kidney disease. The vaccine will have no interaction with your medications. What happens when you receive the vaccine, it is absorbed internally into your system, and it will not interact with any current medications that you're on for your chronic conditions. I've had patients ask me, hey, I'm on Humira or medications for my rheumatoid arthritis. You can still receive that. You can get the vaccine. It will not interfere with those. Next slide. I'm allergic to eggs. I shouldn't get the vaccine. Well, it is not like the flu shot. There are no eggs in this vaccine. And the other thing I want to mention, there have been some, particularly in the Catholic population, who've been concerned about the presence of fetal tissue. There is no fetal tissue in this vaccine. The vaccine technology was derived from stem cells about 1,000 order generations before. The current material that's in the vaccine does not contain aborted fetal tissue or stem cell tissue from anything of that nature. The next slide. The last myth is these vaccines were developed to control or track population through microchips. Well, the truth is they're not putting microchips in you like we put them into our pets. They're not going to be tracking you. Next click. This was because somebody picked up on a post or somewhere from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that there was they were developing digital certificate of vaccine records so folks could travel and take that with them. This has no connection with the vaccine, as I say, whatsoever. And the other myth that came about was this issue of a super deep freeze for Pfizer, -70. That's so something special could be in there so that we'd be stable to be injected for tracking. Again, wrong. The reason it was such a deep, low temperature for the Pfizer was to keep the messenger RNA protein snippet stable. Courtney, I'd like for you perhaps to talk about when can we get the vaccine?
All right, so let's talk about when we can get the vaccine. Next slide, please. All right, so right now we are currently, North Carolina is currently in phase 3 of the vaccine rollout. So that includes our frontline essential workers, that includes our teachers, and then there's some others, that of course they're in that category. We are also still in phase 1, which is our healthcare workers, and then phase 2, which is our anyone 65 years or older. I think that it just came out yesterday that we will be moving to phase 4 on March the 17th. So there will be more people that are able to get the vaccine, and that includes adults. I want to say this 16 to 64 that will be able to get the vaccine then, and then those that are living in congregated living, and then also those that are homeless. And then we will finally move into phase 5. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Wright mentioned at the beginning, we are trying to, at Cone Health, build the trust and create some educational opportunities for our Black and Brown communities. We are setting aside 35% of the doses that we receive for our Black and Brown community members. We've also partnered with organizations within Gifford County to administer these vaccines at larger venues. We've also been able to go out in the community mobily so that people have easier access to the vaccines, and we've partnered with some churches and community centers. And then we've also tried to increase access for the vaccine appointments through automated and then direct outreach. Next slide, please. All right, so how can you help? So we want to go ahead and make sure that when it's your turn, you can get the vaccine. So if you've gone to conehealth.com/vaccine, you can get on the registration list there. For those that do not have internet access, we also have this phone number that's listed right here, and you can call anytime, Monday through Friday, 7 to 7 p.m. to get assistance with registering for the vaccine. We also want you to encourage others that are in your community to get the vaccine. You've been on this informational session today, so we want you to go out and, let others know what you've learned. And then also, if there are people in your community, help them get registered. Next slide, please. So how to help register 65 plus members with limited access. So as I mentioned, we do have the phone number, but we also have our Healthy Communities Department where you can contact. We'll give you that contact information after this presentation. And then someone in your community can serve as a proxy to identify and collect the information that we need, such as name, address, and date of birth for those community members. And then someone from Cone will have you fill out a spreadsheet, and then we'll able to take that spreadsheet and create appointments from that for both the first and the second appointments. Next slide, please. So again, it's all about education. So just making sure that, we're, getting our information out to the community, and it's the valuable information like you've heard tonight. And also we have other vaccine town halls. So if you want to go to the Cone website and find out when those additional dates are, you can go to do that as well. Next slide. So what can you expect when you go to the vaccine clinic? So of course we want to make sure that people are wearing their mask and that people are socially distanced. We also are going to ask you to wait 15 minutes if you've never had a reaction to a vaccine, and then we'll ask you to wait 30 minutes if you've had a prior history of vaccine reactions. Also, if you're receiving the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, you want to make sure that you have another appointment set up to get that second dose. And then just remember, as I mentioned earlier, you may experience some pain and swelling at the injection site, and you may experience fever, chills, and then tiredness or headaches. Again, those are common side effects. So again, there's some information if you want to find out how to get the vaccine, and then also just, the town halls that are available for the community.
Thank you, Courtney. And also want to mention on that more information that we at Cone Health are partnering with our county health agencies, and they also have a website, a county website, or you can call county health agency to check availability. And I also know CVS and Walgreens have begun offering vaccines. In fact, I was at a Walgreens the other day on Randleman Road at a mobile medicine clinic, and walked into the Walgreens, and they were already vaccinating there. So I know Walgreens is already up and running. And I know the president announced last night that by May 1st, to Courtney's point earlier, it will be at stage 5, open to all. And I believe they're looking at some type of national website that may collaborate or coordinate all these things. It'll be interesting to see when that comes out. So there should be multiple places to be able to access the vaccine. What I'd like to do now is turn this over to questions. First, I'm going to click on my chat so I can look there on the chat for questions that may come up. But we have some already that we had received. But if you have questions as we go, please use the chat box and we will answer them as they come in. But some that we'd already received from the community. First of all, what was our own individual experiences receiving the vaccine? Courtney and I both have received it. Courtney, what was your experience like? Were you hesitant? Did you change your mind? Did you have a good experience with the vaccine?
So I want to say at first I was hesitant about the vaccine, and like you mentioned in your slides before, it was more so about, okay, this vaccine was made really, really fast. So, once I just started doing my own research and also just looking at the data, that quickly changed my mind. And then also just trying to be an advocate for my family. So I, went ahead and took it. I didn't have any problems with either the first dose or the second dose. So I was good.
Okay. Ms. Pemberton said the volume is low. Can everybody hear everything we're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure.
I do have a few questions, just overhearing what our community members have been, saying around the social medias and internal conversations between children and parent. So could you please clarify for our viewers watching who exactly are creating these vaccinations? A lot of them are believing they're originating from China. That's another misconception that a lot of our community members have been hearing.
Yes, none of these vaccines were developed in Chinese labs. The Moderna vaccine, it's a U.S. lab. Pfizer, there's international, European, and then U.S. It was a multiple effort there. And so they're not from some foreign thing bought and brought in. So they are all completely developed. Johnson & Johnson as well. Courtney, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so they were able to actually kind of create these vaccines from previous, I guess, viruses that have been out there. If you can think about maybe SARS or MERS back in the early 2000s, they kind of already had a idea of, what some of these vaccines may look like. So they were just basically able to use what I guess the older research that they've done and used it with the new technology that we have now. So mRNA has been around for a while. It's just we have not used it before.
Awesome. And another question would be, well, I'm young and I'm healthy. Do I really need to get vaccinated?
Yes, you do. If you care about your community, your family, if you're living in a multifamily house, or if you want to continue to pursue your education, which I'm very proud of you, Melina. It sounds like you're doing some great work there. Your professor's here to shake the head that that's work's occurring. But just think about this. We want to get up to 70 to 80% of our population vaccinated. And what that means is the viral load that you have in you will be much less, if it non-existent. So if you were to get sick, you may not even know it. I can't tell you how many positive COVID 20, 30-year-old individuals I talked to during our mobile testing who were very mild and they were surprised they even had it. But at the same time, I can tell you that we have cared for in our health system and in other surrounding health systems young people who were fairly mildly ill, and then 2 weeks after they became ill, they got better, then they had a massive stroke or some sort of blood clotting event related to the virus. So you don't know whether you're going to be that or not. And the last thing I would say is you don't know whether you're an actual super spreader. A lot of young people have been super spreaders in certain events, typically because their voice is really loud, they're able to project, they're at a party, what have you, close-knit, poorly ventilated, they're in a choir, poorly ventilated area. This is how our young population can spread it, and so that's why it's very important for you to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I think the term asymptomatic, a lot of our community members have a little bit of a hard time comprehending because, I'm not sick, so I can't possibly spread the disease or the illness or whatever it may be. So I feel like that's where that misconception comes with, I'm not sick, so I don't need it. Well, I also have more questions here.
Yeah.
Well, if I get the vaccine, there's going to be some long-term side effects. My children might, develop like that. So how do you feel about those types of responses?
So far, we have we're following long-term the research trial participants. The vaccine was given an emergency use authorization, which means because we're at war, we got this vaccine out quickly. My prediction is there will not be long-term adverse outcomes from this based on how this is developed and how it interacts with the immune system. And so far, the trial participants who all were in the trial last year, no long-term side effects have been identified. All the issues were short-term, more upfront things relative to allergic reaction or the low-grade fever or the soreness in the arm, but there's not been identified any long-term ill effects so far.
That's really good to hear and reaffirm with our viewers watching. And then another question here is, well, since everyone else is getting the vaccine, I'm just going to rely on herd immunity. Like, I don't need this vaccination. I'm just going to sit back because you know what? Everyone else is vaccinated, so I shouldn't get sick, right? How would
I would reply that is incorrect reasoning. Again, we need about 70 to 80% to really get it. And if you want to talk about natural herd immunity, look at the Swedish experiment. That didn't go so well. They went mask-free. They were going to go for that herd immunity. Didn't work so well. Also, take South Dakota. That's another experiment that failed, going wild out there without masks and whatever. And that herd immunity didn't exist. So natural herd immunity is very difficult to achieve in our populations. And so getting the vaccine, getting those antibodies boosted up. And by the way, the fever you get, the soreness you get, I always tell my patients, that's your body's body armor building up. You're building your body armor up so you're going to protect yourself, you're going to protect your loved ones, but also it's a civic responsibility for you to be in this country to take the vaccine so that you don't give it to somebody else who does suffer that unforeseen COVID blood clotting storm, we call it, where somebody gets terrible clotting in the heart or lungs or other places, or has the stroke and dies. So you're protecting others in the community as well. So, and you got to get that percentage up.
Right. I think a lot of times we tend to just read whatever we see on social media without even really delving into the substance of what is being projected to us. And I feel like a lot of times there aren't a lot of credible sources. So for our viewers watching, who should we look for in terms of information and credible information so that we can effectively educate our community members like our parents and our older generation?
Courtney, why don't you take that one?
So, as I mentioned in the presentation, I think it's, valuable information that we're presenting here. So if you're able to, show this to someone else later on, definitely do that. Also at the town halls that we have here at Cone Health, people can find out information there. And then also, if you know that maybe another organization may need some help, definitely contact us and just let us know. And, we would be willing to definitely let that information be heard. We don't want people going on Facebook and going on Instagram and finding, this information, because it can be passed down with the wrong information. So definitely want to get that valuable information out. Someone did have a question.
I do have a question.
Yeah, there's some questions on the chat. Do you have to take the vaccine once, or you take it every year? Right now, you would get, if you get the Moderna or Pfizer, you get 2 vaccines spaced out, and then with the Johnson & Johnson, it's 1. So I think right now we'll have to see. It's possible a booster 12 months from now may be necessary, much like we do with the flu shot. Courtney, what do you think?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So right now we really don't know how this is going to, land. So basically they're still following these participants from the trials and just trying to see, how much immunity they've built up and how long it's going to last. So at this point, we really just don't know.
And there's a question about some community members are on their way to path to U.S. citizenship by taking the vaccine. Would that trigger this public charge accusation against them? The Supreme Court upheld this rule last year. I might defer to others who have more legal expertise. I would hope with the new and current administration that wouldn't occur, that they would be able to come forward and receive the vaccine. Courtney, if you have any thoughts, or anybody else on the call.
I don't think that this should defer someone from trying to get the vaccine. It's not like we are trying to record information to see, who's not legal, but I do not think that this should be something that should defer someone from getting the vaccine. We want everyone to receive the vaccine, and I think that's really what the government is putting out as well, that everyone should receive the vaccine.
A couple others that we got in advance: is the vaccine safe to take if you're pregnant? While not studied, if you consult with your obstetrician, it should be safe. And there are pregnant patients who have received the vaccine. And also, it does not cause infertility. It does not interrupt or does any harm to your DNA, so it will not make you infertile. And you need 2 doses for the Pfizer and Moderna because of the way those work. It builds your immunity up. And if you just got the 1 dose, it will protect you some, but you do need that second dose for the full protection. Johnson & Johnson, only 1. And then also, if you get the vaccine, can somebody in my house gets COVID, do I need to quarantine? Yes, you should still quarantine, because even though you've had the vaccine, you could pick up the virus. and could in fact then maybe spread it at a low level, even though you yourself may not get sick. The amount of virus, you'll be less contagious than if you did not get the vaccine, but it's possible you could still give the virus to another, which is why the next question, do I still do the 3 Ws after I got my vaccine? I heard somebody say, I've got my get out of jail free card. I can go run around and do whatever I want. The answer is no. Until we get to that 70% level, we can't run around and take our mask off and go have parties and do that. You can have a party or you can have a family gathering with those who've already been vaccinated. We have been given that notice this week by the CDC, but you should in public still wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands for the period of time until we get the population vaccinated.
Yeah, just to go back on that, I think a lot of people forget that vaccination is a preventative treatment and not a cure to the actual situation at hand.
Yep.
So most definitely we need to still follow these public procedures to ensure that everyone's still being safe. We have some more questions in the chat here. Who is likely to get a bad side effect or even high risk that could lead to a critical condition? Any study on that? Thank you.
Courtney, I'll let you take that. I have some thoughts, but what do you think?
So they seen it more so in the younger population. And then also so who is likely to get a bad side effect or even high risk that could? So we haven't seen any really, I guess, high risk side effects. That's what the question is. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. Do you want to?
I think what that's implying, I did read, we've had some patients, we've had one in our system, and I think we've read about others across the country with a severe allergic reaction. So when you come to the vaccine clinic, we have EpiPens, which is a medication that treats an allergic reaction, and that's been studied, it's been published. We do know if you have a history of lots of allergies and you've seen doctors and you have a lot of drug and environmental allergies, you may want to consider communicating with your doctor, your allergist first before taking the vaccine. That would be the only caveat that I have, the only thing that I have read. But other than that, and of course, the treatment for the reaction is very quick and very prompt, and it's very reversible, the allergic reaction. We have medications we give for that, besides the on-the-site EpiPen, which is what most people who have severe allergies, they carry that around, right? It's a little injection. So that becomes important. There was a question, if I don't have a primary care doctor, who do I call if I do get sick? At Cone Health, we want to take care of our community. And so obviously, if you have a severe reaction that's delayed 1 or 2 days later, you should go to the emergency room and be seen, or an urgent care. If you have access to a computer platform, you can make a telehealth visit if the illness is milder. We do want to make that that out there. If you don't have a primary care, that we will have somebody can see you. What happens if people miss their appointment for the second dose and wait longer than 21 for Pfizer, 28 for Moderna? Well, actually, in some instances, I've had patients get sick with COVID between the first dose and the second, and they've had to delay. And there have been patients who have had a medical procedure or something else happen to them that caused the delay. It's perfectly safe to delay for a week or so. You're not going to miss out by doing it on day 30 or day 29 or what have you, as long as you get that second dose.
I do have another
Go ahead.
A question for you to debunk. A lot of people in the Indigenous Montagnard community have been feeling like, well, I'm not getting the vaccine because we're just being used as test subjects and lab rats. How do I know that those clinical trials are real?
Yeah, and in our Black and Brown community of color, that's been a major issue. When you look at some of the horrific public health research trial injustices in the 1800s and 1900s, whether it's Tuskegee and the syphilis, the sterilization experimentation, other types of experimentation that have occurred, the Nazis in World War II, et cetera. I can see where there would be that lack of trust. But know that these trials were done in an open fashion. They were openly recruited. There was a placebo, meaning there was a group that didn't receive a real vaccine, those that got the real medication, and that was done in a very safe and just way. No one was forced into it. It wasn't like people were, given something they weren't aware of. It had the full informed consent. There's been so much change in research in our country since those terrible days of the 30s, 40s, and 50s when these types of public health things occurred and these injustices occurred to our Black community of color and Asians and others. So I feel like that these were conducted in a very ethical way, and there was very much openness for those that came and participated.
Thank you. And for anyone of our viewers or anyone who's thinking now, hey, I think I want to get vaccinated, where should they look out in terms of news to know, do I qualify to get vaccinated right now? What group am I a part of? And how would they go about after that?
I think the best one Courtney's already mentioned, I'll let Courtney back up, there's something else, is the Cone Health /vaccine website, has everything on it, or go to the Guilford County or whatever county you're in, Alamance, Rockingham, Randolph, or Guilford County, whatever county you're in, go to your county's health department website as well. That will have those, they will both have the most up to date. And of course, news media outlets, others will have lots of information. If those that do look at television or other things will see that as well. Courtney, anything else you'd say?
I think you covered it. Yeah.
Please address this one heard in a barbershop setting a few weeks ago. I'm going to wait until I find a place to get the Johnson & Johnson, so I only have to get one. If we encounter people who say that, what should we say? Okay to wait or get what you can? Look, I'll tell you what, if I were in a situation where the only vaccine I had available to me was the Johnson & Johnson, I would take it. As a doctor, as a lung doctor who's on the front line seeing patients every day who have COVID, I would take the Johnson & Johnson. I absolutely would. And I've heard this from other medical colleagues across the country that I work with, because it has great efficacy in terms of making you get sick. You don't end up in the ICU. You don't end up on oxygen. The other thing we don't talk a lot about is what we call the COVID long haulers. It's one thing to talk about hospitalization and death rates, but think about all the patients I'm following now in my clinic who have long haul conditions, chronic neurologic, chronic muscular, chronic lung conditions, heart conditions, severe chronic fatigue. I've got 3 patients I have to see like every 2 or 3 weeks. And then, of course, the other issue is all the pre-existing conditions that weren't recognized become manifest when you get COVID, your diabetes, your hypertension you didn't know about, and they are more difficult to control and manage, and you need access for those patients. So, again, this is why this effort becomes very, very important. Take the vaccine that you can get. They're all 3 very good. Do people have to get vaccinated every year in the winter in the same way as it goes for flu, or do you think it's going to be every 6 months or less, since this is the corona same? So what we said earlier would be that literally we think possibly there might be a booster 12 months from now. We'll have to wait and see. But what we're doing now is going to take us well through to the end of 2021 into 2022. And then from there, we will see what 2022 holds.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wright. This is Dharma Sethi. I'm a member of the International Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for answering my question. This last question was mine, and I know the bottom question had some typos, and so I wanted to clarify the second question.
Sure.
Yes. The question that I'm also getting in the community, because we work with the international community, is if the vaccine is supposed to build your immune system against and develop those antibodies, and please pardon me because I'm not a doctor, I'm not sure of how everything works, but generally the people are raising the question if this vaccination is supposed to build your immune system and have the antibodies against the virus prepared, then what's the point for somebody who already got the virus taking the vaccines? If I've already gotten the virus and I overcome the virus, I felt better, and now I'm good. I have the immunity. My body already probably developed the antibodies. Then the question from my children also was raised, and people in my community is, what's the point of taking the vaccine after I have already gotten the virus and overcome?
Right. So there have been multiple large studies done at the NIH, at the National Institutes of Health, and at the Center for Disease Control, looking at large populations who had the virus and how long they kept an antibody. Particularly these studies were done around the convalescent antibody program, where people were donating plasma who had COVID to try to treat patients in the hospital with donated plasma with antibody in it. And what these studies show is there's a large variation in how fast you lose your immunity, your antibodies, after you've been infected. And and you can't predict who is going to lose it in 1 month or 2 months, or maybe take 6 months. And so as a public health measure, we recommend patients who've had the infection get the vaccine. And so that is a very strong recommendation. It's based on science. It's based on what we have heard the scientists tell us. And so our public health recommendation is, if you've had the virus, yes, the last question, if someone's had COVID-19 a few weeks ago, should they wait a certain amount? If you've had the virus, you need to recover from the virus. Wait a minimum of 2 weeks from when you first tested positive, and you fully recovered. So a lot of people, like Melina said, are mild or have if any symptoms. They should wait till they're out of isolation, their isolation time is over, then they can go get the vaccine. If you were really sick in the hospital, or you received monoclonal antibody, you're likely going to want to wait a little bit longer, but not 90 or 120 days. You can probably get it within a month or so, but you need to wait a little while.
Okay, so in the past, we were told that it was 3 months, but now you're saying 3 weeks is good enough for you.
Yes, you're correct, Dharma, Ms. Sadie. The initial recommendation, this is why I have to go to the CDC website. I'm not kidding you all, every week, because every week something changes. That's how fast this is moving. So in the beginning, in January, in fact, I noticed our marketing department had our slides set for the 90-day thing. First of all, we had very little vaccine available when we first launched. As we all know, how it got launched in January until it started really revving up. And so because of that, they actually said wait 90 days. But now the science tells us, and the vaccine availability is greater, don't need to wait 90 days. Wait till you're completely well of your symptoms, and you're a minimum of 2 weeks out. That I'm not kidding, literally changed 2 weeks ago. I was preparing a talk for United Way, and that popped up that week.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for participating and joining us. It is 6:35, so we are going to be wrapping everything up. Once again, thank you, Dr. Wright and Dr. Issam, for your presentation today. I feel like a lot of people have gained a lot of new knowledge, and hopefully this will be able to be reposted. So repost this down on Facebook, whatever it may be, share it to your friends. So hopefully we can debunk a lot of things we've been seeing on social media. And as a reminder, COVID-19 is still out there. So your 3 W's: wear a cloth mask, wait 6 feet apart, and most definitely the most important one, wash your hands. Okay. So I think that should be it to wrap this all up. And thank you all again for joining us today.
Bye-bye. Good night, everybody.
And actually, Ha just had a couple of things that she needs to add. Go ahead, Ha.
To the community members out there, if you're watching this video and if you need help with making appointments, please contact us. And our office phone number is 336-373-1812. And we open 5 days a week, from Monday to Friday, from 9 to 4 p.m. So feel free to call us, or if you're not comfortable talking on the phone, you can always message us on our Facebook page. And I would like to thank you so much, Jamila, for putting so much effort in making appointment for our community members and for helping us putting together this meeting. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining this meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.